Zero. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's, this week's scintillating edition of Jawin with Jack, where I, Jack, the one you're looking for, am here to talk to our special guest, which is Mr. Ryan Howard. Ryan, how you doing this evening? Go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
You know, Jack, I am actually doing great. I was picking up my daughter from school today, and usually I will sigh and say something like "Daddy's tired" or something like that. But I stopped myself because I was thinking I'm actually feeling great right now. So it's good. It's been a while.
Excellent. Good. I'm glad to hear that, especially coming off of a holiday. Usually it's pure exhaustion after that. The place I usually start with the show when I have somebody on, of course, I followed your YouTube's antics up to this point, and also other social media as we talk a bit. Mm-hmm. But how did you actually get started in this RPG hobby? When was that? What game was it? What edition?
Oh man. So I know there's a good bit of a generational gap between us. So you're just gonna have to hold on to something.
It's 4th edition, isn't it?
It's 5th edition.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I was 19 years old when 5th edition came out. I will be 30 exactly 1 week from today. So I was 19 years old.
I've got characters older than you.
Yes, you do.
Go ahead, please continue. So it was 5th edition. You were 19.
Yep.
Was it like brand new at that time? What was it that led you into that? Were you introduced to it by a friend? Was it the first season of Stranger Things? What was it?
So I had been, I'd been involved in nerdy stuff for a long time. I'd played Warhammer 40K. I'd played HeroClix.
Oh, okay,
I was buying comic books on a regular basis. So I was broadly familiar with the concept of Dungeons and Dragons. However, I had been warned away from it by my mom because she remembered back to the 80s, the Satanic Panic kind of stuff. And so even to this day, well, not to this day, now she's actually played and understands that it's not scary. It's just kind of sad, really. But she was afraid of me playing D&D. So every time I had, previously been like, I want to see what this Dungeons and Dragons thing is all about, my mom would be like, no, you stay away from that.
Warned you away from it.
Yeah, but I was 19 years old. I was in college. So and on top of that, I was and people are gonna jump off now. I was a theater kid. I was in theater.
This tracks.
Yeah, all through high school. I was studying theater in college. A terrible decision, by the way. Don't ever do it.
Wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me that a drama degree is not worth the money that you have to put out for it?
Absolutely not. To the point where I switched my majors to the only slightly more useful philosophy degree. But
slightly more useful than
slightly more useful.
And slightly, yes, less useful than learning how to play role-playing games, as it turns out.
Yeah. But, it was just like reaching out to people on Reddit. I was, just, hey, I don't know anything about this game, but it looks like fun. Is anyone willing to bring on a new player? And I found a couple groups that were the first game I found out was a all too common experience of I played with some strangers. We had fun. We played 2 sessions, and then we never met up again.
Oh, wow. Were they in-person sessions?
Yeah, they were in-person sessions.
Holy mackerel. Wow.
And then I found another group, and I played with that group for the rest of my college time. So I went from 2 sessions and it's over to we're going to play together for 4 years.
Okay, that's a big difference. I had the hardest time. Well, I was younger, before high school. I had a hard time having a consistent play group and maintaining a campaign. So For me, it's impressive to go from something so short, but then also having such a long and consistent play group.
Yep.
After that D&D experience, you played in that group. Did you move on to like DMing after that? Did you DM for that group or do your own thing?
Yeah, that was we were playing together for I think like a year and a half at that point. And I went to the DM and I said, "Hey, I'd like to give this a try. You've built this whole homebrew world for us. Do you mind if I start running a campaign and we can switch off every other week? Just give you a little bit of a break, let me kind of pick some of this up, give you a chance to actually play. Do you mind if I start running a campaign that's set 20 years before yours in the same world?"
Oh, I love it already. Okay.
And he goes, "Yeah, sure, that sounds great." And so that we started playing the game, and we were very careful, like not to like trample on each other, but there was a lot of commonality between our campaigns because his campaign started there. It was in the immediate aftermath of this giant magical apocalypse. And so I had my thing that I was building up to in that campaign was, okay, well, obviously we're going to end up in this giant magical apocalypse. And so I was kind of building towards it, and we were, kind of feeding off of each other. He'd have one thing show up in his session, and then a couple weeks later I would have like the younger version of that show up in my session or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Foreshadowing and cross-pollination.
Yeah.
I love the time travel themes that it invokes too.
But yeah, that's how I learned to DM was, that my friend, his name is Muhammad, he showed me how to run 5e, and then I, took that and ran with it. And along the way, we started experimenting with other games. I picked up Deadlands.
Very nice.
But it wasn't really until I started doing Rollin' Bones that I started to move beyond like 5th edition.
Okay.
And that was that was the reason why I started doing Rollin' Bones, was I wanted to push myself. I wanted to become better. And so I just wanted to see, like, who can I talk to? Who can I get on the show for a conversation? And so I had a friend who hosted an actual play podcast, the Knights and Nerds podcast. He came on, and we had a show together. I, interviewed my friends from that gaming group very early on. And then I started to discover that I had this weird superpower of pulling guests that were way beyond my actual reach and ability. So like I cold emailed Shane Hensley, the creator of Deadlands, one of the guys who was very heavily involved in Dark Sun.
Yeah.
And said, "Hey, Shane, can you come on the show?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely."
I got to admit that the response for me has been overwhelming as well, and I've been booked up 2 or 3 months ahead the whole time because I've just been excited and reaching out to everybody I want to talk to. So, but it's almost intimidating how easy it is to get a yes out of people in the RPG community.
And the big one for me, this was before there was a YouTube channel. I was just doing an audio podcast. Episode like 5 or 6, I interviewed Larry Elmore, and I had no business interviewing Larry Elmore at that point because I was a moron who had I just got here 5 minutes ago. But he was so generous with his time. He was a great interview. And it just kind of continued that way. And I got to be friends with a lot of the kind of original OSR guys. I got to be friends. To this day, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world is Levi Combs from Planet X Games.
Yeah.
He's a great friend. I'm going to see him in January when I'm at Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo. But being able to talk to these people and learning, hey, there's a world beyond 5th edition D&D. That's really what kind of began this evolution into who I am sitting on this show today.
I know from past experience that you're heavily steeped in the OSR world and all and those sorts of types of alternate fantasy. You even have Night Haven that
Yep.
they've produced to be generic. What other genres and games, like you mentioned Deadlands? I'm a fan myself. I actually have the original rules on the shelf behind me.
Gotcha.
And the pre-Savage Worlds version, and I love that version of the rules. It's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, Westerns is kind of the big second one for me. I love Westerns. I love Western movies. Um, the Red Dead Redemption series is one of my favorite video game series. So it's
My
hard to
wife speaks
find.
really highly of it.
Yeah, it's hard to find people like around my age that are willing to play the cowboy game. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. It was, I don't know if it's something in my generation, but in the 80s, cowboys and westerns were about as not cool as you could be. It was all about sci-fi fantasy or whatnot. And as a consequence, I passed over a lot of them, and in more recent years, I've started watching some of the old school classic westerns. Like, I watched The Outlaw Josie Wales for the first time last year, and what a fantastic movie.
Yep. Yeah, I love that one. I love Fistful of Dollars. That's probably my favorite of the Eastwood Westerns. And then beyond Western games, I really like WEG Star Wars. I think that's a great game.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. I played that back in the day.
And I've been fascinated with superhero RPGs. I found only a couple that really do what I want them to do. But I find that basically the reason why so many like alternate to fantasy genre RPGs fail at the table level, not necessarily at the book level. I think if more people read the books, they would understand, what games are trying to pull out of them more clearly. But at the table level, everyone is so conditioned to think in D&D terms that they try to run games like this is going to be D&D but with superheroes, or this is D&D with cowboys, and there are times where you can do stuff like that. If you want your Western game to go into a haunted mine and you can have kind of a dungeon crawl type situation there,
Sure.
you can do that, but the genre material that you're drawing from is going to be completely different. The scenarios are going to be completely different. You have to change your thinking and change the way that you approach the game. And there's only a couple superhero rule sets that I found that actually do really well at reinforcing that.
And what are the ones that you found?
Mutants and Masterminds is pretty good at that because it encourages you to structure sessions essentially like they're comic books.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And then the other one is Ascendant from Autark, Alexander McCreese's.
Okay. Yeah.
And that one, I know a lot of people read it and their eyes go crossed because it's so detailed, but that's the beauty of it. It's so detailed.
Yes. I do understand logarithmic math is involved.
Yes.
And so I would have to take a refresher course just to play this game, I think. But I guess if your game is not demanding a little something from you, then maybe you should reconsider your choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I honestly, and I've written an article about this before. This is an intellectual hobby. If you think about where it came from, it was college students in wargaming clubs.
Absolutely, yes.
When you read the books that Gygax wrote, it's clear that he's writing for an educated audience. It's just something that over time got adopted by 12-year-olds. And so that has had, I think, and not to bash people who put picked up the book at 12 years old, but you can tell in the way that the game has evolved that it's essentially evolved out of a 12-year-old's understanding of something that is kind of beyond their knowledge, but they never went back to re-examine it. It's always this kind of copy of a copy of a copy moving forward. And I think we should ultimately embrace that, yeah, like this hobby requires you to read and think and, God forbid, do a little bit of math. And that's not a bad thing. That's what we're here for.
You said the M word.
Yeah.
Someone call the emergency number. Okay. So I have to agree. I do see what you're saying too, because my own personal experience over the years was I tended to prefer the Beckme rule set throughout the 80s as opposed to the AD&D, although I played that a lot as well. And but the way we played D&D is what we've always anecdotally heard is we dropped all the silly rules that were hard, didn't make sense, required a lot of paperwork and math, and that's the truth. That applies to me. Like the second it began to resemble homework, now we're dropping that. You know, we're not doing that. That's too much like homework. As an adult now, though, for the last 3 weeks, month or so, I've been in a first edition rules is written campaign. And it's awesome. It is awesome to be using everything. I am a first level fighter with 1 hit point.
Scudder for Mike would be ecstatic. Do you know him? Do you know Mike?
Scudder, yes, it's Scudder for Mike's D&D game. Actually, I'm playing it.
Oh, nice.
Yes, I am.
You're the guy. You're the guy. Okay,
I'm the guy.
I was wondering where that came from. That's awesome.
Yes. I am a 1 hit point fighter. I am that 1 hit point fighter. Yep. That has been a ton of fun. But the case in point there is exactly what you said. With a more mature mind, I've been able to readdress this game and look at these rules in a whole new light. It's kind of funny to reread things that I remember reading as a kid and saying, I understand it. I'm not doing that. I'm just not. So the way I played AD&D resembled more like Beckme, or dare I say Castles and Crusades anyway. Much more simplistic and rules light.
Right. Well, and that kind of brings up, as we were talking about this, I thought of this post, I think it was like a couple days ago, username Corpse King over on
Oh, yes,
on X.
I know him. I have his game.
Gotcha. He posted a question, said, is encumbrance even a fun mechanic in RPGs? And the usual suspects all responded. You know who we're talking about here. And by the way, I say that with all the love in my heart because those guys are my favorite.
Yeah.
But my response to it was, and I can read it here. Is it, in quotes, fun in the sense that it places a restriction on the party? No. But it's fun in that it forces a sacrificial decision to be made by the party, which creates drama and an opportunity for role play. And this is something I'm writing an article on right now that'll be out later this week. This has been kind of a key building block of my thinking about RPGs and GMing in particular. It's a time preference question. You have to put in a lot of time and effort at the beginning to do things like, yes, you have to calculate encumbrance. You have to, reference the weapon versus armor table. There's all these things that are often dismissed as clunky or crunchy.
Correct. And specifically that particular table you just mentioned, the weapons versus particular armors, is actually one of my favorite additions.
Oh, yeah.
It adds so much to the game, not the least of which is the absolute supremacy of the longbow as a ranged weapon.
Yeah, we should come back to that because you and I can have an incredible conversation about that, especially with the channel that we're in with the martial arts stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we should drag Crossface on just to wrestle with us.
But But the time preference question here, what you get out of, doing all of that stuff is a deeper, richer experience.
Yes.
You're really expanding into new dimensions because people try to break up exploration, role play, and combat into different pillars of the game. And yes, like there is a degree of separation there, but also when you're exploring, you should be role playing. Otherwise, you get into the problem that 5e often has of what's the ranger supposed to do, because people didn't read the book. Or you get into what's the fighter doing while the bard is trying to negotiate a higher rate. In all of these situations, you have an opportunity to role play. You just have to have the mechanics to back it up there. A fighter in a social situation is a show of force. He's a force multiplier. Just by standing there in his armor with a sword, putting his hand on a sword, that sends a message during a negotiation. So the fighter should be actively engaged, even if they're not speaking or trying to influence it. They're influencing it with their presence and in the way that they're carrying themselves. Likewise, you find yourself in a combat situation. How do I role play in combat? You've got 3 orcs down there and you have 2 arrows left. What do you do? That is an opportunity to role play.
Well, that depends on my role. Am I a magic user or a fighter?
Yeah.
Or am I an archer? Am I a melee guy? Yeah. I really get what you're saying is role playing expresses itself in every decision you make as the character.
Yeah.
And the important point is on the one hand, I really dig the guys who say, well, no, that's just me in another body. I'm making the optimal strategic tactical choices that I can. I know the game system. I'm not living in that world, but I'm here for the gaming part of it.
Yeah.
But for my part, the deeper level that you're talking about, the immersion really comes in by saying, well, if I'm some guy who's lost in this dungeon, what would I really do in this situation? I've got a sword, I've got a shield. Would I stay and fight? Would I turn and run?
Well, even if you are thinking about what's the optimal tactical decision, if you yourself came across 3 orcs in a cave underground, you'd probably be thinking about what's the optimal tactical decision here. So your game, thinking about it in a game mechanics point of view, that is the language with which you interface with the game world. So it's fine. Like, you're still role playing if you think about it that way. You're just thinking about what levers do I pull here. Maybe you don't necessarily put yourself in the mind of that character, but that's role playing. What do I have at my disposal to turn this situation in my favor? What's the outcome that's going to allow me to walk away from this with my life? These are questions of role play as much as they are mechanics.
They really are. And it's really driven by the choices. It's a matter of having the mechanics to handle the player choices. Do you find yourself favoring systems that have like a core resolution mechanic like Siege Engine or something like that? Or do you favor something more like AD&D where there's a whole bunch of more arcane subsystems? Because subsystems can be tooled to handle a specific job a little bit better. A core mechanic is easy to keep in the front of the mind and is less cognitive load.
So what I'm working on with my Project Skeleton.
Nice segue. Plus 10 XP.
Nice. But with that, I do have everything kind of revolving around a core mechanic, because I think that's easier for people to pick up on. However, that core mechanic changes. The aspects of it change based on certain circumstances. So the core mechanic is with an opposed action. So like combat, it is your roll, which will be a D20 to represent your puncher's chance. Your any given Sunday is that D20. Plus either a D4 through a D12 to represent your training in a particular skill, or if you don't have any training, but you have just kind of a raw talent, that will be reflected in the dice as well. And that will allow you to, gain more training, which will, kind of improve your dice. And so you roll that, add those numbers together versus the roll of your opponent. And then depending on how much higher or lower you are than your opponent, different outcomes occur from, you hit, but he's able to recover, to you hit and you deal more damage than normal, or, I use a wound system rather than a damage system. So you deal an extra wound this time, or you straight up kill him, or force him to drop his weapon, or are able to attack, that's kind of what I'm playing around with, is using a core mechanic, but having some variability to it based on the amount of training and skill that you have in a given field.
A comparative idea that springs to mind is the stuff I've heard about the Mithras system through Black Lodge Games, of the various special effects that can be inflicted through special rolls and actions during a combat. I wonder how much, if there's similar ideas that could be mined there, or comparative ones.
There probably is, and I'm not super familiar with Mithras, but it sounds like that's probably a system I should take a look at least to see how they implement certain things.
It's definitely interesting. And I haven't delved very deep into it myself. It seems to be essentially the same as RuneQuest 6th edition from what I'm hearing. So, and it's that same core style basic role playing. So if you know Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green, you know basically how that system works. But the one thing that differentiates it is how they structure the combat and the hit locations for all the special effects. Which I have played it enough to know that is really true. Like, if you want to internalize those rules, they do add an intrinsic narrative layer to the fighting if you want that in your action.
Now, you mentioned hit locations there,
right?
And these are things that kind of play together. Something that I really want to bring out in my system, and I might end up being over my skis on this one. I'll have to see how it all shakes out once I start putting mechanics together. But hit location, weapon versus armor, and even the effects of having armor on certain parts of the body, or having layers of armor. These are all things that I want to bring about, because when you look at the reality of medieval style combat, your weapon choice actually did make a difference. There are certain weapons that are more appropriate for a battlefield scenario, like a Becta Corbin or a halberd or something like that. And then there are weapons that are more man-to-man weapons, which is what a sword would be typically used for. And with so many role-playing games, that aspect is taken away because it's complicated and people view it as difficult. But when you take that away, when you're choosing between different weapons, all you're really choosing between is bigger dice and aesthetics. And I really don't like that. I just really, I hate the fact that people can get away with, I'm going to use the same weapon in every situation, no matter what, instead of, oh crap, it's a skeleton, I've got a sword, what do I do? Because stabbing this thing isn't going to do anything.
Right. And I think that is driven by, like, people so rarely even have held a sword in their life.
Right. Yeah.
Let alone swung one. So when they go to play a game, they're used to more like that TV or movie mentality.
Yep.
It's like, of course he's using a bow in every fight. He's Robin Hood.
Yep.
Of course he's using a sword. That's King Arthur. Why wouldn't he? But now, that's one of the interesting things that I do think got overlooked, lost over the years, if you will, is that shift away from a historical basis to the game to more of a cinematic and television basis for the game. So, like early on, so much of it is war game. It's highly tactical, and exactly those kind of weapon choices matter for whatever you're trying to accomplish. Beg pardon.
No, all good. But like to your point, yes, we think about it in cinematic or I think video games have been kind of a big offender of this as well. A lot of people lean heavily on a video game understanding of combat in modern role playing, but even if you take the like cinematic approach to it, Empire Strikes Back, that armor's too strong for blasters. What do? You end up having the whole scene with the tow cables, which clearly is not what those things were intended for. I don't know why they had the cable guns on there, but they weren't expecting to come up against AT-ATs on Hoth. Otherwise, they would have had heavier weapons. So you have a situation where these pilots have to improvise some kind of way to take these things down. That's not use of their main weapons. If you were to run that scenario like your average kind of role-playing combat, the speeders would just be shooting their blasters repeatedly, ticking down the health bar, instead of thinking creatively to take these things out of commission. So even from a cinematic perspective, we're failing our players in a lot of ways by making weapon choice not really matter. I know in the moment it feels bad of, hey, this is my favorite weapon. Why isn't it working against this monster? But then figuring out what does work is, that's the victory moment at the end when you do something off the wall crazy, or you pick up a weapon from a fallen enemy and this works, something like that. It's that resolution of combat in a different way. It turns combat into a puzzle in a lot of ways.
Indeed. And I really get that. That's a great point too, because it shows that the modern game, it's worse than being cinematic or movie like. They've even drifted into video game territory. It's the press the attack button over and over again until their life bar goes away. Have you ever had a player like that at your table? Somebody who comes from that kind of background? And what did you do to encourage these elements?
So the times where I've encountered the most resistance to stuff like that is generally at convention games. When people that play in my home games generally know what to expect from me, because I am not quiet about my opinions on certain things. I just rant. That's why I even bother to, jump on live shows myself. I like the sound of my own voice, I guess. But
I don't know what you mean. No idea.
But it's at these convention games where you run up against people who you truly understand. No, not everyone's been thinking about this the way that you've been. And sometimes they just don't get it. But you really do have to encourage players. That's one of those. You can either be like, all right, tough love. You're gonna have to figure this out. Get good. The Dark Souls approach. Or you kind of like pull them aside and be like, hey, there's a way to get past this. There, I've not left you to hang here. You just have to figure it out. Oh, there he is.
Am I back? I'm
yes,
back.
You're back.
For some reason, my connection keeps dropping.
It happens.
as you were saying, you have this at conventions, and I can see where it would be much more prevalent. Like you were saying, it's nothing teaches you quicker that not everybody's on the same page as you are.
Right.
Welcome, Patty.
Hey, Patty. I love Patty.
Pardon moi.
But no, it's like with martial arts. We encounter this in martial arts as well. You don't walk in to the dojo and immediately get it unless you're some kind of generational talent. And, I tell the story a lot in my first class. I practically tapped myself out trying to apply an Americana for the first time just because I didn't get the mechanics. And so, it's difficult, but you take two approaches. One is the, hey, you get good. You're going to have to figure this out yourself. Or you take someone aside and be like, hey, you are going to get this. Just think about it for a second. You can do it. You can either be, tough coach or the cheerleader for them. And it's just about, finding, which approach works best for which people. And then some people just won't get it at all. And at a con game, it's okay. You won't ever see them again. If it's at your table game, like your home table, they probably need to find another group, I guess.
Well, it's rare, but there have been times where I find that if I'm that at odds with somebody, they don't really enjoy playing at my table anyway, so they tend to move on of their own volition. It's just not with.
Hope you went robot on us, Jack. Still robot. All right, I think you're back. Oh no, he's gone. No, Patty, we have not plugged Rake's Codex yet. So for anyone out there who doesn't know, the Rake's Codex of Nighthaven Volume 1, that is my book. You can find it on TTRPG. You can find it on Lulu. I'll go ahead and pull up the link here while we wait for Jack to come. There he is.
I made it.
I was just shilling.
Good. What were you shilling? Anything fantastic?
Just the Rake's Codex.
Let's slow that down a little bit. There we go. I don't know why my ticker was going by at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Okay, there we go. And it's funny, but this is the second time in a row I had Ben Gibson on, and he had to play host for a minute or two when my computer randomly restarted. Naturally, I suspect the Russians. This is clearly a case of Russian collusion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got goblins in my interviews. This is true. There's goblins all over the place. You can smell it everywhere. It is back. I mean, it's a dual stream. It's John with Jack while he's rolling the bones with Ryan.
I mean, I guess so. I don't call my stream Rolling Bones anymore. I do still stream once a month. Sometimes I'm trying to get to twice a month, but I mean, Malachi, unfortunately, Rolling Bones just isn't going to come back in the way that it was. That's not necessarily what I want to do with my life anymore. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it, but we're now at a year of not doing it, and I am perfectly fine with not doing the show and that.
Do you find you don't really miss it?
Yeah, I mean, I liked talking to people, but I can also talk to people on other shows, or if I just want to talk to someone that I enjoy, I can bring them on for a one-off. But it got to the point where, and I think, we talked about this privately. There were people who, when I made the transition to, I want to start publishing games, I thought, okay, I've promoted these people. Every time, they've asked to be on the show, I've been like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Let's talk about your most recent book. And then when I had something, it was just, oh, that's not what we wanted you for. We wanted you to promote us, not enter into our space. And so,
wow, was it said that directly to you in so many words, or did you infer that from the way you were treated?
It was inferred from actions and the way that I was received in certain places when I did try to assert that I, one, had opinions on how games ought to be designed, and two, wanted to make them myself. And so when that started to happen, and when that continued to happen, I was just like, you know what? Nuking this. This isn't an option anymore for you guys. Or anyone for that matter. But except for me.
The reasoning for that, yeah. I mean, that's one of those things. Like me personally, right now I don't have aspirations for any specific publication kind of goals, but I kind of feel like that when I have an idea, I'm going to want to put it out there, and it would be kind of the same thing. I would definitely appreciate people that I've had on have me on in return. Plus, it's just plain fun,
And Patty, you are not one of those people. I love you, Patty. It was an awkward time when I put out the Rake's Codex of Nighthaven. And part of the reason why, so that book is called Volume 1 because obviously I intended for there to be a Volume 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. I'm switching my strategy. So there's not going to be necessarily a Rake's Codex Volume 2. There's going to be a Nighthaven broad setting book with actual mechanics using Project Skeleton. The skeleton system is going to be my, skeleton for role-playing. And Nighthaven is going to be ingrained in that and wrapped around it, but the format in which I release books is changing. But when I published the book, there was supposed to be Volume 2, Volume 3, and it was spun out of what was supposed to be a joint release project, which fell apart for numerous reasons. And so, yeah, like that book very much, it feels like, it feels like I skidded to a halt on the runway with the landing gear broken off and was able to, like climb out of the plane and be like, I actually landed the thing. It's a smoking, smoldering wreck, but I got it here and I'm not dead. That's really how it felt when I put it out.
Wow. That's good. And Patty saying here, he remembers when he got on X, you had the best threads on gaming philosophy, and he brought it up with Brewski all the time on his podcast.
I appreciate it. That's why I started doing the Substack. Was those threads got a lot of traction. I got a lot of my following from doing those threads, and I just wanted something that was more readable.
And in what way does your RPG design philosophy inform the Skeleton Project?
So over the years, I've gone from kind of that OSR minimalist mentality that so many people have. I basically want to think about RPGs like, the internal combustion engine. It works, the mechanics that we have work well. How can we take parts from, this engine and rearrange them or add new parts and make it work even better. I'm not trying to completely reinvent this thing. I want to optimize it. Because I don't want to be like Matt Colville, who's just, throwing out random weird mechanics because, I don't want to do a D20. Well, why not? Because I don't want to do a D20. That's not a reason. And so,
yeah, I think you'd look fabulous with a dye job. I'm just saying, I could probably use one myself, color up the beard. The gray is showing. It's showing. I need to, my adoring public. No, I get it. Yes. But I agree in general with that. From what I've heard about Matt Colville's system, it's nothing that I'm especially excited for. I'm a really hard sell on a fantasy game now because I always have been because of D&D. So throughout the years I've tended to collect other game systems and other genres and stuff. But when it comes to fantasy, D&D was always king for me.
Yeah.
So it's I have a lot of OSR games, but when I get around to actually playing, it's generally D&D or Castles and Crusades. Fun King, good to see you, sir.
Absolutely, good to see you.
I don't see you, but
how's Andy Griffith doing? He's dead.
Well, yeah, I was going to mention your famous. I was going to mention your famous relative, the dubious prestige conveyed by distant famous relatives, and so it's time to bring up that you are in fact related to the director Ron Howard.
I'm not related to him. At least not directly.
Oh, right, not Opie. Yeah, maybe the family tree crosses over somewhere. No, but you are in fact related to the Howard who should be baked all D&D. Appendix N, Robert Howard.
Yes.
Wow. How did you find out about that? Is that something your family talks about, or is it? How did you even learn such a thing?
No, so we're very distantly related to Robert E. Howard. He is my fifth cousin 4 times removed. That's how distantly we're looking at.
Okay, yeah. I don't even know what that means. Once you get past third cousin twice removed, I'm like, I don't even know what that means anymore.
To give a very brief summary of it, our family tree branches off from each other somewhere around the late 1700s. One son stayed in North Carolina. Another one went down to Georgia. My family is the North Carolina branch. The Georgia branch, some stayed there, and then some went to Texas. And it's the ones who went to Texas that were the direct descendants, or that Robert E. Howard is directly descended from.
Okay.
So that's where kind of the breaks and the branches go. But it was during COVID. I had just picked up the Solomon Kane collection.
Oh.
And I was reading Lovecraft's obituary for Robert E. Howard. Because I had assumed just, again, it's like Ron Howard. We have the same last name, but we're not related to each other. His family's from like Massachusetts or something like that. So, and then Mo, Shemp, and Curly, Howard is not their real last name.
That is correct.
Their real last name is a little more ethnic than Howard. But I got to thinking after reading the obituary, because he mentioned Howard was of Scots-Irish planter stock from Georgia and North Carolina. And that phrase right there, I went, wait a minute. So am I. And so I started looking into it. I was like, okay, if his family, according to Lovecraft, is from Georgia and North Carolina, They're Scots-Irish planters.
Right.
There's some kind of crossover there. Like we have to be related to each other at that point.
Right.
And so I start digging. I go on ancestry.com. And the Latter-day Saints had it all there for me. I was able to put all the pieces together. In a couple afternoons worth of work, I was able to build out the family tree and learned a whole lot about my family in the process. We're related to, and again, we're an offshoot because we ended up in the New World. We're related to a noble family in England. There is an ancestor of mine named Henry Frederick Howard, who was a Knight of the Garter, which is one of the highest knightly orders that you can obtain in English knighthood. And so like there's a lot of cool stuff about my family going all the way back to like the English Civil War.
Very cool.
And so, you know, it was an opportunity to just kind of learn, hey, where did I come from? But also I'm into fantasy, and now I can tie myself to the lineage of Robert E. Howard, who unfortunately had no children, so he has no heirs running around. But in a way, as a lover of fantasy and a distant member of his family, I can not think of myself as an heir and that I'm entitled to all the Conan money. That's, you know, obviously not.
Maybe you should be.
No.
But think of the money, Ryan. Think of the money. Think of what you could do with that money.
What was funny when I found out, I reached out to the curators of the Robert E. Howard Society, and they said, "You're the most distantly related Howard that has reached out to us to let us know." And I was just like, "Okay, fine, yeah, all right."
Oh, rub it in, why don't you?
I thought I had uncovered some kind of family secret here. Apparently, all the Texas Howards know, and they're all involved, which is great. It's great that like a portion of my family is invested in this, because my dad didn't know. No one on none of the North Carolina Howards knew. Why would they? But yeah, it's something that I can carry forward of like we're of the same stock, we're of the same people. I love fantasy, I love writing. He loved fantasy, he loved writing. Maybe there is some kind of metaphysical connection there that I can draw upon, at least for my own inspiration, of I have a legacy to live up to.
I can really understand that. For whatever reason it is, there are certain people in the artistic sphere that you just resonate heavily with. And it can be for a seemingly trivial but very personal reason like that. I kind of feel a similar bond for Cormac McCarthy just because of the last name.
Yeah.
You know? And however, I hate reading his books because he makes me feel so inferior. So inferior.
Cormac McCarthy. I read Blood Meridian for the first time last year, and that was an experience. And that's, I haven't read any other Cormac McCarthy. I need to. There's a couple that I'm really interested in reading, but that's the sense that I get from all of his books is when you put them down, you just like have to take a deep breath and be like, man. Oh man. But yeah, that's what it was with Blood Meridian. As soon as it was done, I was just like, what did I just read?
Well, McCarthyism. Good old Uncle Joe.
Now that's a McCarthy you can be proud of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I used to joke about that. You know, I've always joked about that. Like he's the uncle I should be ashamed of. But in more recent years, I'm like, yeah, actually, no. Uncle Joe was right. I should be putting it like he should be hanging. The picture of him should be hanging up in people's schools next to MLK.
Yep.
Or maybe even instead of. I don't know. Get rid of the commies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I do hate I love the color red. I hate commies, and they're not allowed to have the color red, the bastards. They can't even make up their own colors. They just take other people's colors. Like income.
But to answer Pun King's kind of first question when he came in about Andy Griffith, I am a North Carolinian, and if you don't love Andy Griffith around here, even though I am of a couple generations removed from people who, watched Andy Griffith when it was on TV
Right.
for the first time, I am intimately familiar with that show. I have seen many, many episodes, and it's part of the cultural lexicon around here.
It is. It's just ingrained in the zeitgeist. And I have to confess, I've always known what it is and who it is. It was always on syndication, but I turned my nose up at it as a kid and overlooked it. And my wife in the years since has convinced me how wrong I was and how great the show is.
Mm.
It's really brilliant stuff.
It is. And if you've never heard it, the like comedy stories or sketches that Andy Griffith did before the show,
Okay.
I think they were radio broadcast. He had this like character that he was playing where I think he was a preacher, but he just didn't. He was acting like he didn't have any like experience with the one I'm thinking of in particular is he accidentally stumbles into a football game and is describing football as if like he'd never seen it played before, and it's hilarious.
I can imagine that, right? And there are two men rolling around on the ground with one another, seemingly fighting over. I'm not sure how to describe that. It looks like a pig's bladder.
Well, he calls the ball a pumpkin. He's like, there are these men, and they got a pumpkin. And what do you know? One of them picks up the pumpkin, and he drops it, and he kicks it to the other man. And it's hilarious.
And it's around this time I noticed that all the men on the field seem to be in one color or the other. It's almost like they're in teams.
Yep. It really is. Some of the stuff that he did that people don't know about or have forgotten about is brilliant. Andy Griffith really was an amazing talent, and every North Carolinian who is actually from here loves and claims Andy Griffith as a proud son of this state.
As well they should. He was a great monologist. Hey, I'm going to come upstairs and wipe that mouth out with soap.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just happened to notice, too, that you recently made a triumphant return to YouTube.
I did. Yep.
You did. What predicated that move? You kind of felt like you had done what you wanted to do, and it was and we're done with the Rolling Bones thing. What brought you back to it?
What brought me back was wanting to talk through my creative process and actually have streams that are focused on, the mechanics that I'm wrestling with. Towards the end of my run on Rolling Bones, I did a couple streams where I was outlining things, excuse me, that I was working on with Project Skeleton. And I really enjoyed those streams. I had one, I believe it's still, all my Rolling Bones stuff is still up there. I haven't deleted any videos, but there's a stream called Try to Understand I'm a Magic Man, where I go through my philosophy of magic and how magic should really be split into basically three aspects and how I wanted to implement that in Skeleton. And that was a really well-received stream from my core regulars. They loved hearing me talk about that stuff. And so I figured, I'm going to keep publishing stuff. Why don't I come back and refocus my streams on just talking about the work that I'm doing.
Very nice, very nice. So rather than being an interview or advertising sort of a platform, you're going to be talking design principles from your own perspective.
Yep. And now using that stream, what, starting next year will be twice a month, to keep myself working and to keep myself focused on, I have to actually deliver some kind of update. I have to have something to talk about. So, use it to keep me on track, basically.
So to give yourself milestones to work against, I can really see that, because that way it's sort of like, oh, I got a stream coming up next week. I got to figure out what have I done.
Yep.
Well, now that we're on that topic, what do you have planned for the coming year?
So I have all of these ideas for Project Skeleton, and I need to synthesize them into not necessarily a complete first draft, but a first mechanical draft. And then I've got to run it for people and get their feedback and refine it. And so that's going to be 2026 for me, is
okay,
pull all these mechanics, these disparate ideas together in my head, write them down into a design document, run it for my home group, which right now is myself, my dad, and my sister's boyfriend. It's a really interesting group that I run for, because they, aside from my games, they've never played D&D. And so, get them to get their feedback, and then go to all there's like 5 game stores I discovered that are within 20 minutes of my house. Go to each of those and run for, just groups of randos. Run for, my friends that I talk to on Discord all the time. Run it for someone like the basic expert and see what his thoughts are on the system. And then just use all of that feedback to refine it and then draft it.
So the goal being, pardon me, hopefully have a rough draft by the end of 26.
Yeah. Have a rough draft and be ready to take something to Kickstarter. Because ultimately, I am going to have to lean back on Kickstarter as much as I don't like it necessarily. Economic realities are what they are. I'm going to have to kickstart this. And what it's going to be ultimately is basically Nighthaven the RPG, Nighthaven the complete system. So you'll have all the information about the city, full city map, the factions. There'll be a couple different books that come in this set, and then the core mechanics designed to play the system.
And the fact that you really decided to go with the more of a system agnostic approach with Nighthaven it kind of indicates to me that you wanted to do your own thing right from Jump Street. You really had your own ideas in mind and wanted to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably going to be for the best in the long run.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest with you, that came about because at the time when I was still part of Guts and Glory, when that was the thing that was going on, we couldn't agree on a home system. Neither one of us were like, I'm going to die on this hill, we have to use this system. We both just kept finding problems with systems that we thought would be a home for us. Dungeon Crawl Classics went out the door pretty quickly. That's kind of where we started. That went out the door pretty quickly. For a little bit, we were thinking Greg Gillespie's Dragon Slayer would be our home.
Right.
But then I had Greg on, and this was his second appearance on the show. I had Greg on the show, and I started talking to him, and I started kind of backdoor trying to sneak in essentially questions like, hey, could I run Nighthaven in this? And every time I mentioned core concepts of Nighthaven, he just sounded appalled. He was like, well, I guess you could if you wanted to, but why would you do that? I was
Oh,
just like, all right,
wow.
well, I'm not.
Wow. Like what sort of things would that, what sort of things would even elicit that kind of reaction?
He really did not cotton on to the idea of cities being adventure ground. In his mind, like city equals safe. And that's, that's a dungeon crawler. Yeah,
Mentality.
that's a dungeon crawler mentality, is the city is safe. Whereas I was thinking the city is a large dungeon. It's a differently formatted dungeon. It has lots of different aspects to it, but like there's so much more to a city than just you can look at cities in the past or cities in the present day.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the city that you live in. I bet you could have some random encounters if you just walked around certain neighborhoods at certain times
Very
of day.
random. Yeah, you end up go anywhere in Cleveland and there's going to be a character of some type. Character is like the primary word for it.
I had a random encounter, and this wasn't like a combat encounter. Thankfully,
knock on wood, I haven't had any of those.
I had a random encounter leaving jujitsu at the gas station one day. I get out of my car to, go into the gas station, get a Gatorade, and this beat up silver van pulls up at the pump next to me, and a man wearing like a too tight blazer and too tight bell bottom pants with a purple Sideshow Bob wig gets out of the car, and just as soon as like he makes contact with the air, all I can smell is marijuana. That's a random encounter
right there. That's definitely Cleveland right there in a nutshell.
These are the kind, like, it's not necessarily like a troll or an ogre or something like that, but considered the right way, it could be. So like there's all kinds of opportunity for adventure, and you have the scrutiny of large crowds, so you can't just walk around with heavy weapons and armor all the time.
Yes,
you've got to be more strategic in what you carry or when you carry it, or how you employ force, because there's guards around all the time. And so it completely changes the paradigm of role play. It's just a dungeon, but with different considerations.
Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to play somewhere where you can't just murder them indiscriminately? Pardon me. What I mean to say is, I think that's another one of those historical aspects that has fallen away over the years. Very realistically, you weren't allowed to be armed with whatever and just rolling around the streets, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so Nighthaven being that way is it makes perfect sense, and it forces a thinking outside the box mentality. I recently got to play some Blades in the Dark with Night Danger, and in a very similar way, they have a pretty nifty quantum inventory sort of system where you decide what you have. Oh, I happen to need a knife. Well, I just happen to have just the right knife right here, and then you scratch off that box on your inventory sheet.
Yep.
It's kind of nifty, but it more importantly is the concept that you're working under the same sort of social restrictions, that you cannot just murder willy-nilly for various reasons in the game world, but because there are immediate consequences of the authorities showing up. And so you're encouraged to think of other ways to try and get through things. And I like that as its base concept. If you're many city adventures I've tried to run over the years have gone off the rails specifically because I didn't enforce that kind of thing enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what it comes down to is you have to have the mechanics in place for that. So even if you get, the Rakes Codex as it is now, there's a whole system in there about, how soon do the guards show up, and how soon after things kick off do like more heavily armed guards show up? When do they start locking down the city?
These are things we need to know.
Yeah.
Any good GM needs to know these things.
Yeah, because you don't often think about this as a wizard, but if you throw a fireball, in a dungeon, it's rocks and maybe there's like barrels of oil that'll explode or something like that. But if you throw a fireball, thanks for stopping by, Patty. I appreciate you listening to us. But anyway, you throw a fireball. Generally, nothing happens other than the intended targets get hit. You throw a fireball in a city, even if you do hit your intended target, you're probably gonna like burn down at least a couple buildings. It's a big explosion.
You're starting a major fire. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, how do people handle that? Someone's gonna go get the guard, and if you continue throwing fireball, they're probably gonna go get like their elite squad, and you're gonna be in trouble.
And what are the chances that absolutely nobody saw you cast that spell?
Right.
And even less chance that no one who fleeing the scene immediately afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about all the crazy things that people post about, like casting enlarge on a ring and then giving it to a king as like, here's your new crown. And then when it wears off, it crushes his head. If you've thought about it in a world where there's like widespread magic use, someone else has thought about it and there are laws against that stuff. So, like committing fraud with magic or impersonating someone with magic or mind control or murder with magic. These are going to be like compounding offenses. You committed a crime, but you also committed a crime with magic. You broke the laws of nature. There's going to be additional penalties for that. Historically, people were burned at the stake for much less. So,
right.
Gotta imagine they're setting up a stake in the town square for you if you start mind controlling people willy-nilly or stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, think of how many people got burned at the stake and didn't really have powers. I mean, you really have powers. You think that you're going to be immune to being burned at the stake?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. We need to normalize stake burnings again. In game.
In game, in Minecraft, after a fair trial.
Now, we did touch on earlier, you have been on your martial arts journey.
Yes.
You've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about a year now, is it?
Not quite. It's been about 4 months now.
Okay, good. Relatively new. Now, what I recall, you were saying that you have previous experience in Kung Fu, don't you?
I do. I can't remember if it was you or someone else in the Discord server talking about the Chen Wu Association.
I think that was someone else. Okay. I have heard of it, the Jinmu Athletics Association. I'm familiar with from movies and stories, but that's it.
Because when that was posted, I was like, I have not heard those words in 10 years. But before all of this, starting when I was 10 years old and then up through 19 years old, I was taking Northern style Shaolin Long Fist Kung Fu. A like super rare, legit, as legit as a external style Kung Fu can be. Style, but super rare, especially in the US. There's only like 3 schools that teach it, and one of them just so happened to be in Denver, North Carolina, of all places.
It's weird how that works.
And it taught me so much about Chinese martial arts tradition and history. My Sifu is this absolutely colorful character from Louisiana. There's a show on Discovery Plus or HBO Max, if you have it, called Kitty Kai, the kung fu instructor on that show, that was the man who taught me kung fu. And if you watch the show, he is a character.
Yes, you dug up one of the clips and shared it with me, and I would have fun training under that guy.
Seriously. Oh man. But like that was my first exposure to martial arts was and he told us about, you know, the history of it and how his great grandmaster, the man who taught him, would go out with caravans beyond the Great Wall and basically just wantonly kill people in early 1900s China because he was guarding caravans, and he had like a golf bag filled with weapons that he carried around with him. And there was just all these crazy stories that I would hear about great grandmaster Ye Huting in China in the early 1900s, just doing all of this crazy frontier stuff. It was like a Western, but set in China. And it just like, it got a stranglehold on my imagination. All the crazy, most likely legendary stuff. Cause this was relayed by, great grandmaster Yi to Grandmaster Lee, who taught Sifu Mark Williams. So couple layers of
transmission.
Translation, and also Chinese men having fun with the imaginations of American teenagers in the 70s. I have to imagine.
We're kind of credulous. Yeah, we are.
But yeah, like it was all just like crazy. Apparently he had just like this strap of ears that he kept on his golf bag of weapons that he carried around with him. And I was just like, I don't care if this is true or not. This is metal.
This is so metal. Yeah. And that's right. It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's true, man. It's cool.
It's a great story.
It's cool. Oh yeah. Well, my grandmaster, he was Korean Special Forces during the war. And he used to go black out like deep behind enemy lines. And he knew all that secret stuff. Kill him with bare hands. Actually, that is true. They told us that about our grandmaster. So
none of it ever, I say all that. None of it ever like strained credulity. I was never told about him like killing people with a dim mock or something like that. It was always like he had a spear and a sword and a staff that he carried with him everywhere. And so he was literally just like cutting people down with a sword, but still.
Which is believable if a little terrifying.
Yes.
That's closer to the stories I heard from my Eskrima instructors over the years. Those kind of scary stories of, my master, they went out knife fighting one Saturday night, as you do in the Philippines. And, they used to like stuff phone books inside their shirts, and that it would protect them from getting cut. And then one of his friends, they stuck him from the side and he died. And he said, "That's enough. I don't think I want to do knife fighting anymore." That's literally one of the stories I got from these guys.
Yep. Now, on the subject of martial arts, I do have to apologize to you. I have a knee-jerk, instinctive disgust reaction when people bring up Jeet Kune Do. And I think you know why. Because you come from that world.
No, please tell me why do you have this knee-jerk reaction to Jeet Kune Do?
So it comes down to, and I had one of these, I thought I was done with these conversations, but I had one just a few months ago. Every now and then you'll encounter someone who doesn't understand that Bruce Lee was a movie star.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll be like, if Bruce Lee got in the octagon today, he would just clear the house. And you just have to be like, what are you even talking about? Bruce Lee wasn't even tough in his day. If Bruce Lee, there were 5 men on the set of every single movie that he made that could have killed him if they wanted to. Chuck Norris is not, actually able to, push the ground down when he does, but Chuck Norris is actually a legit tough guy.
He is.
If that fight were real, Chuck Norris would probably have won it. And then, even more than that,
the harsh reality of weight class. Yes.
But even like beyond that, Bruce Lee was contemporaries with Judo Gene LaBelle.
Mm-hmm.
If he had gotten on the wrong side of Gene LaBelle, which could have happened if, Gene was in Hollywood at that time, he was a stuntman, he was doing all kinds of stuff. If Bruce Lee had gotten on the wrong side of Judo Gene would have murdered him.
Yes.
And
and again, this is one of those things that the Bruce Lee cultists will jump to his defense, but the hard truth is the MMA, UFC has taught us, if you don't know grappling, you're pretty much defenseless against a grappler.
Mm-hmm.
That's just sad fact. It's fact. I don't like it. I wish my magic kung fu powers worked, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. But it's those kinds of people though that, and a lot of them do end up gravitating towards Jeet Kune Do because they worship Bruce Lee, and they kind of like worship at the altar of this philosophy of, well, I don't find that useful, so I'm not going to use it. And it's like the Rule Zero question: is it not useful, or do you just not understand it?
Oh, well, that's a wonderful parallel between the two endeavors, because I do see that now, because I definitely see where you're laying it down there. If I try something once, we go over a particular move or grapple or punch or kick in a single class, and I go, okay, that's not working for me. I'm not going to use that at all. Dumb, don't do that. You need to learn a technique and learn how to use it before, like, you really do need to use it many, many times before you really know whether or not it's working for you or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah, like within every martial art, there, like, even in jiu-jitsu, I talk all the time with the guys that, with my betters, who put up with my presence, at the gym. They talk about developing a style and developing a game. The coach will go over something. Not everyone in the class can use that. Because not everyone is built the same way. Not everyone has the same strengths as a grappler. The idea of only use what's useful to you is inherently present in martial arts because people are different. They're built differently. We have different anatomy, different physiology that, kind of pushes us in different directions.
Sure.
Some people prefer a more kick heavy style because they got long legs and strong legs and they're able to do stuff like that. But then, I'm 5'8". I'm not going to be kicking anyone in the head, especially anyone who's taller than me. So that aspect of martial arts isn't really going to be a strong suit for me, no matter how flexible I may get. There's always going to be a ceiling on who I can kick in the head.
Right.
To have that be the central guiding principle that you like worship at, and I'm not saying that like all Jeet Kune Do guys are like this or anything, but to basically, have that be your smug put down for everyone. Like you're basically saying like, hey, water's wet or something like that. Obviously.
What? Yeah. The other sad blow that many people don't want to accept in the Bruce Lee thing is the fact that he is, well, if not eminently defeatable, there's no actual evidence that exists that he could fight for real. So there's
he has no professional record.
He has no official record of any type, and that's just like any other street fighter. I've won 17,000 fights on the street. The number of times I've heard that kind of stuff, I mean, take 20 seconds on YouTube. I bet you can find somebody saying that. We got the Charlie Zelenoff going on over there.
Let me pull up a Sheeta Kim's website here and see what his record is.
I killed 17 people with my bare hands, and they didn't even know I was there. That's a Sheeta Kim.
Mm-hmm. But again, like these are all things that have just kind of built up my initial disgust reaction to Jeet Kune Do. It was very judgmental of me when you first came in to be like, Jeet Kune Do is a joke. Because I like even something like Aikido or Taekwondo that's, not necessarily optimal for a real combat scenario. It all depends on who's teaching you and how legit the person who's instructing you is. And so, like, yes, there are Jeet Kune Do instructors who teach very productive, very helpful, very useful iterations of that martial art. There, and it's like that across the board. Maybe not in like Systema, because that's just LARP, the martial art, if you even want to call it that. But
LARPing arts.
Yeah, you can find it in pretty much every discipline. So I just wanted to say that publicly here, because
on behalf of Jeet Kune Do practitioners everywhere, I accept your apology. And that's doubly funny because I'm not actually a Jeet Kune Do practitioner. I'm a Taekwondo guy.
Gotcha.
However, I did mention, though, that I own and have read the book, right? And I actually do enjoy the book and find value in it, because as a traditionalist who comes from an art that is not typically considered combat ready, as it were, it's good at its one thing that it does, and that's it. Kind of the same principle, though, that the Jeet Kune Do ideas of hack away the stuff that you don't need. I'm a firm believer in a convergent evolution of martial arts, like we discuss in the server quite often. So many grappling techniques that are showing up in jiu-jitsu really have a long history in catch wrestling and folk wrestling and all the various styles that I still can't sort out all of them. I believe that the striking arts are exactly the same. If I took the Taekwondo techniques I knew, focused on what worked, which is, punches, low kicks, elbows and knees, and really focused in on those, I'd end up with something that looks a lot like Muay Thai.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the, like the Savat pill that we all kind of went through there for a little bit. When I forget who it was that I think it was John Pliskin. I think I have the right user there.
Oh,
Maybe.
I think you're right. He had a lot of really interesting discussion about the Savat and the history of it and all that it came from.
Yep.
And if I recall correctly, he really dunked on the notion that they learned it overseas in Asia and brought it back. And it was like, nah, that was their thing. They came up with that on their own.
Yeah, because I definitely was at one point in the camp of no one in the West ever figured out that you could just pick your foot up and maybe that would generate more force. It was the Japanese and the Chinese and Koreans that figured out that you have feet and can attack with those too. And we had to, pick that up from the, no, that's bullshit. Like everyone knew that. Everyone who's ever done a combat sport of any description has figured that out at some point. And Savat is one of the most well-documented examples of a primarily kicking art that was developed whole cloth in the West.
There were boot parties and boot stomping.
I guess there were, yeah.
Well, there were. I mean,
Yeah.
they do use the boots in the Savant, so
Mhm.
I do think they call them boots even.
Yep. But no, it really has been interesting being in there with everybody, especially with kind of the Western focus that Crossface has for martial arts, because there is a deep and rich martial tradition uh, in continental Europe and the British Isles
Absolutely.
that even carries over into America, and we have our own grappling tradition and our own martial arts tradition that a lot of people don't think about. It's not just about the Asian arts, as influential and cool as they may be. There's a lot of homegrown stuff that's just as cool.
And that's certainly true. I mean, being a child of the 70s and 80s, I definitely fell victim to the marketing and cultural buzz of things like karate and judo and whatever else, kung fu in particular. I do those posts about kung fu movies. I love them to death, and it really does make one overlook, though, the fundamental good of both boxing and wrestling.
Mhm. Now, were you ever a black belt magazine reader?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, yeah. And I was even kind of like one tier above that, because I was in the ATA and they had their own little magazine that they published a few times a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an even lesser known rag that I was addicted to. But yes, I was a frequent black belt reader.
I'm glad you mentioned ATA, because that strip mall ATA was basically my exposure to Taekwondo, and I can't lie. The opinions that I developed of Taekwondo came from those like ATA offshoot schools where they were teaching kids to play dodgeball.
And around what time was this?
This was in the mid 2000s.
Mid
So
2000s.
this
Okay.
was like a degree, like, again, like there were 5 or 6 ATA schools within just a few minutes of my house.
Yeah,
It
actually, I
was
used to travel down to North Carolina frequently for tournaments.
it was
A lot
over,
of ATA schools in North Carolina. A lot.
but it was like a point of oversaturation and commercialization at that point.
Mhm.
Because what my Sifu told me, and again, maybe this is just like me being judgmental. He was like, it's going to take you 10 years to get a black belt here, and that's just how it's going to be. Like, that's the rate at which we're going to go. It'll probably take you longer because you're 10 years old, and I'm not going to give a black belt to a kid. Was his. He always said he would never give a black belt to anyone under 18 years old because it was a false sense of security.
Yeah. I can understand that. However, at the same time, one could argue that a black belt over the age of 18 is also a false sense of security.
Yes.
But that's a different topic. We can address that later.
Yeah, a black belt.
The black belt in all cases is a false sense of security. You need a gun and running shoes. That's what you need. That's the best self-defense.
Because he would also tell a story about one of his friends, and his friend was not a black belt. He was I think he was a purple belt. But he was at a party in I think Shreveport, Louisiana, somewhere just absolutely nasty. And there was an incident going on, and he thought he could disrupt this incident, this friend of my Sifu's, by just taking off his shirt and flexing. And the guy who was causing trouble shot him. So, yes, an advanced belt in martial arts, in most cases, if you don't have your head on a swivel, if you haven't actually internalized the lessons that martial arts is supposed to teach you, in all cases, it's a false sense of security.
I would say so. For me, the main thing I took away from it is situational awareness. I have yet to find myself in a situation I couldn't talk my way out of or walk away from, or situations that I just am not in the first place because I looked down there. Oh, that's a very dark alley. I don't think I'm going to go down that alley. I think I'm going to stay on this brightly lit alley. And you know what? I'm not going to walk along with my face buried in my phone. I'm going to be looking around. And when I meet somebody, I make eye contact and, give them a little nod and hello. I don't like people sneaking up on me.
Mm-hmm. But to take this all the way back to Black Belt Magazine.
Yes, of course.
There is, and I feel the same fascination with Soldier of Fortune magazine, of a similar era, of a similar kind of genre of essentially niche publications for sensitive young men. There's this crazy crossover between the two that I'm absolutely fascinated with. Just the like newsstand disposable material of that era, and the guys who wore like combat boots and camo pants despite never having even like been near an army base, picking up these magazines and reading. There's just some like chef's kiss about that.
Yes.
It's glorious.
And maybe Watsy needs to do Dragon Magazine again, and it'll be the same thing. It'll be a magazine for all these people who don't actually play the game, but they love all the buying the stuff and wearing the paraphernalia and need the merchandise and everything.
But though both of those publications are just so kino. There's something just so innocent and special about. We're interviewing Frank Dukes about all of this stuff that totally happened. Wink, wink.
100% serious, man. That's journalism. That's journalism. Yeah. Oh, great. Glad to see you. I always keep my head on a swivel, look forward at reflections on windows to see what's coming up behind me, and sit with back to a wall where I can see the door in public. All good things. Another thing I've done at night is I make sure I stand where the light is behind me and I see the shadow in front of me, because that way if someone is coming up behind me, I will see their shadow.
Yep.
Small tips. Also, don't live in Cleveland. Just plain don't live in Cleveland. Especially East Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I live outside of Cleveland now. It's one of the suburbs, so it's like marginally better. It's like living on the rim of the trash can instead of in the trash can. All right, but I digress. Now, how has martial arts training tempered and affected your taste in games? What are the martial arts that show up well in role-playing games?
So this is something that I'm kind of trying to bring out. Malachi.
You heard that. That's called marketing. That's like that was the same people who told you that, Malachi, are the people who told you about Greenland and Iceland.
Yep.
Okay, pardon me. I'm sorry. Martial arts in role-playing games.
So this is something that I feel like, especially fantasy role-playing, kind of underserves. I like the idea of, I'm playing a character who, I'm going to go adventuring, but I make my money as a pit fighter. So I'm gonna try and punch the orc, or I'm gonna try and choke out the troll or something like that. A lot of people are like, well, that's stupid. It doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, well, I don't care. It's cool.
Yes.
And I will try to make it make sense.
Good to see you, Yang. We were just harping on martial arts and kung fu schools and how terrible it all is.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely terrible.
It rocks
because and how terrible Cleveland is. So you're in good company.
But martial arts and and role playing, that this is one of the things that AD&D actually does really well with the grappling and the pummeling table. That subsystem right there is, it's really cool. If you get into it, like, you can do some really cool stuff with that. And
one of the most beautiful things you can hear in AD&D is glancing blow, strike again.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff goes on forever.
But and that comes back to the way that we view combat, and when you incorporate grappling and striking as possibilities in combat, you open up the door for, more creative thinking. Because I use this example a lot. So many people look at combat like it's an old school JRPG where the two sides are separated and they take turns hitting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say that's happening in a corridor of a castle with suits of armor on the sides. In the JRPG mindset, that's just, set dressing. That doesn't factor into the fight at all. In role-playing games, because we're not limited by hardware, everything factors in. So grabbing and throwing someone into that suit of armor to, gain the upper hand in combat is in play. Tripping someone, with the carpet, with your staff, again, like into the suit of armor, pushing that suit of armor over onto somebody. These are all, strike and grappling based things that only become possible if you start thinking about the environment in its totality. Even, like the classic swing on the chandelier and kick someone in the chest.
Right.
These are things that should be in play because they, just open up the options for players. And so I think that's
where we benefit by a little bit more cinematic thinking. Like, whereas if people come at it from a video game mentality, like you were just saying, it's it's my turn to attack, roll to attack, I do my damage, move to the next person, as opposed to thinking about what's in the environment that I can use. What can I interact? Can I swing from the chandelier? Can I knock the armor over into him? Can I roll this barrel down the stairs at the guards coming at us?
Mm-hmm. Or even, can I take this guy down and pin him long enough that the fighter can get a shot with the sword? Like, can I hold him down while someone else hits him? Kind of bring in the like teamwork aspect of it.
Absolutely. And that's a great one. I mean, I think it's automatic double damage for the thief if he gets to stab in there.
Yeah.
I'd give it to him if I was the DM. I'll say that much.
Yeah, and so, like with skeleton, that's something that I want to be able to incorporate. Is if you are able to get someone in a compromising position, you have the you get bonuses to attack, or there's more damage that you can do. How that's all going to play out, I still need to fully work that out. But grappling and martial arts is an aspect of that, and it's something I want to build an entire profession around. Of like, if you want to, you can be a pit fighter. You can be a professional pit fighter who also, in his spare time, adventures with other ne'er-do-wells for further fortune and glory. Because you want to be the guy who goes into the arena and is announced as the dragon puncher.
That dragon? I punched him.
Yeah.
Grappling and I usually have modified grappling and restrained rule to help. Now, Yang, I seem to recall that you're mostly experienced in the 5e world, and I do believe that unarmed attacks like a la the monk get handled more or less as normal. So did you pull from first edition in any way for those, or did you find something else that you adapted, I wonder? A fist does die 4 damage. Well, I mean, that depends on the fist. I mean, if I'm a high-level monk, I might do a D20 to you.
Well, and what DMG scale models there is pointing out, this is one of the reasons why I want to move away from hit points. And what I'm doing is wounds, kind of like the way that Savage Worlds does it.
I like it.
So instead of worrying about, oh, well, this does bigger number, instead of like, thinking about it from the video game perspective, it's a matter of, instead of this does bigger number, it's more what's appropriate for the given situation. And in that paradigm, because, in real combat, you can kill somebody with a punch based on how they land, or even, some people have been punched hard enough to die. This is possible. So while, yes, cutting someone with a sword is probably going to deal more trauma than punching them in the face, in all circumstances, that's not the case. And I want to be able to, adjudicate that correctly, so that if you are a pit fighter, you can punch someone in the face and deal a wound because, hey, you broke their orbital bone and now they can't see.
Right. Yeah. You've dislocated the jaw, any number of actual injuries.
Yeah. Or you punched them, they fell, and their head bounced off the floor.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Because that's one of the main things, in my style of Taekwondo, they required the headgear, the foam gear, right? And I'm a big advocate of that in retrospect, because if nothing, even if you get knocked out, you're going to be saved clunking your head on the floor from falling. Those little foam helmets will save you so much head trauma just from falling down.
Yep.
It's great. But now, have you indulged in any martial arts specific games? I got a couple like Ninjas and Super Spies, anything like that?
So that I have not, and that's something that I actually would really enjoy, is some kind of like specifically martial arts focused, even something like adjacent to like Fist of the North Star, I think would be cool. So you said that was what Ninjas
I
and
have
Super
just
Spies?
the thing. I have just the thing. I have Lone Wolf Fist, which is basically,
that's right, Joel's game.
Yeah, Joel's game. That's basically Fist of the North Star, the role playing game. I haven't gotten this to the table myself yet, so I'm excited to do that. But I'm a longtime fan of Ninjas and Super Spies. That's the Palladium game, but also Street Fighter, if you can believe it or not. The Storyteller role playing game is the same system as Vampire. White Wolf put that out back in the 90s. That's an interesting system, and it does a surprisingly good job of simulating the video game. So if you're a fan of the video game series Street Fighter, that game is a can't miss.
Because that's been like, I'm also a huge professional wrestling fan. There have been a couple attempts at professional wrestling RPGs, not many successful ones. So like that's another thing that, to crack that code. And a lot of that comes down to, do you treat it like it's real or fake? And in my mind, you treat it like it's real.
You got to have buy-in from the performers, or else you'll never get buy-in from the audience.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Malachi is a fan. You know it. I have a solo Street Fighter campaign that has been going on off and on for 20 years now. So one of these days, I'll get together with Malachi just to bend his ear about it. But again, one of the original, the old school granddaddy of martial arts and role playing games is the first edition Oriental Adventures. Have you ever had the pleasure?
So I've not played, but a couple years ago at North Texas RPG convention, I was setting up my table to run one of my Night Haven sessions, and I look over, and at the next table, Zeb Cook is running Oriental Adventures, for a group of people. And so I was just like, well, okay, all the attention's going to be over there. I better not disturb him.
Yeah. I can imagine Zeb Cook steals the oxygen in the room just a tad bit.
I can't, and it was a small room, so like he is just right there. I was like, if I make too much noise, Zeb is going to be really annoyed with me.
Now, Zeb Cook, he didn't write the first edition one, if I remember. Did he write the third edition book? I'm trying to recall. I'd have to go run over to my shelf to see. Because I thought Gygax himself wrote the first edition book. And the third edition book was done by somebody else, which was a worthy book in its own right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right that he did the Gygax did the first edition one. Let's see.
Got it.
Yeah, Zeb Cook did. Yeah, he did the third edition one.
Brilliant. So, I wonder if that's what he was running at the time.
I think he was actually running from the Gygax book. I think he was running like first edition, because at North Texas, like everything is so focused on old school games. I think he was actually running Gygax's material.
That would make sense. Well, my whole point of bringing that up is if you have not experienced the martial arts rules in that book, they are so broken it's to die for. It's and it does a decent job of imitating many tropes from the kung fu movies, but like there's you can do such things as start out with a first level character with 3 attacks barehanded that does D10 each. Like it's primo broken stuff. I wouldn't change a thing about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing when you embrace the idea of kind of bringing martial arts into the fold, like as an adventuring character, you do kind of have to go ridiculous with it. You almost have to be like Dragon Ball Z with it.
Yeah. You have to accept the myths. You have to accept the things like levitation or the dim mak or that 120-pound guy can take on a 300-pound guy with a good chance of success. He's got a chance. And like we said, everybody who's a Bruce Lee fan wants to believe he could win that fight, but Chuck probably could have beat him.
Yeah.
Probably could have beat him.
Sorry, guys.
It's a sad truth. It took, as a former Bruce Lee junkie, it took me a long time to accept that myself. I rejected that kind of stuff at hand and stuff like that, but I've come to recognize it for the truth that it is. You just can't deny that kind of things. Too many years of watching UFC. It's just the evidence is too hard to deny.
Well, and what it comes down to, and it's the same. Actually, it's more pronounced with Jackie Chan, because Jackie Chan doesn't even pretend to be a tough guy. All of his movies are predicated on, oh no, I found myself in this situation. How do I get out of it? Jackie Chan fights play out like if you took the actual result of a D&D fight based on what people are doing at the table and just filmed it.
Right. Yeah.
But these are movie fight scenes. And so, yeah, a lot of the stuff that Bruce Lee was doing was impressive. And yes, he moved very, very fast. And, the myth of, oh, he had to slow down for the cameras. Yeah, sure. But does that, that doesn't equate to real world brutality, because it is brutal and ugly. And when you see movies that have like realistic fight scenes in them, you kind of like shy away from it because of the brutality of, oh, like that's a very real fight that I'm seeing in front of me. Or when you see it in reality, when you see actual fist fights break out in front of you.
Yeah. It's a very, very intense experience.
Cause like I've not been involved in any serious fist fights. I've punched people and been punched in the face, teenage kids messing around or
Similar,
getting mad at each other, but I've seen in front of me real fist fights like go down where there's malicious intent, and it's one of those things where just like the oxygen sucked out of the room.
Right. And in a way I do understand people when like we see phone videos or whatever of people just standing by watching something, because when something's happening for real in front of you, shock does set in. You start going, is this real? Is this a skit? Are there fake cameras? What's even actually happening?
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, that is so true. But I guess that's another thing to talk about, is if we hyper focused on realism, our gaming would be very different. And as a matter of fact, that was kind of the death of complicated gamings in the 80s. There was that constant, well, D&D is so unrealistic, so here's our system that handles armor much more realistically. It's no longer whatever. It's no longer makes you harder to hit. It absorbs damage. One of those big things. But the flip side is realistic systems that try to be realistic end up not being any more realistic than the rules light systems. They're just more complicated. Now, I'm not familiar with Ascendant. I may have to make room for that. But Champions, for example, is a great one. It's a very complex and crunchy system. You can do a lot with it. It works fantastically. It's not even close to modeling the real world.
Right. And I've talked about this with Victor Gorchev before, because he focuses so much on like modern firearms and incorporating those into role-playing games. In the real world, when you fire a gun, there are all kinds of considerations that go into it. If you think about snipers and how real snipers function, they have to account for bullet drop and wind conditions. They have a spotter with them that tells them to make adjustments. There's all kinds of physics that you have to account for when firing a weapon in the real world.
Yeah.
You want to account for some of that, but not all of that, to make firearms function in a way that makes them stand out in role-playing games. But if you hyper focus on that, you end up just kind of crunching numbers and doing all kinds of crazy. You don't have to actually make like a trajectory calculation to fire a gun like you would if you were a real world sniper.
Right. Okay.
Because
relief.
It just bogs everything down. So if you want simulation, if you want there to be, something more complex to give your game a little bit more meat, it does have to be tempered with essentially the patience of the gamers at the table. And how much can you get people to do? How much is too much? And it's a balancing act. But the way that I think about it is I have gotten to where I really dislike the rules light versus crunchy debate. I think that's the wrong frame that people take on gaming. All games are going to be simulations. That's just what a game is. Games simulate given circumstances. So the gamist, narrativist, simulationist nonsense that needs to go out the door. All games are simulations. What you're looking at is how complex of a simulation do you want? How much do you want to simulate? And that is going to come down to how high of a resolution do you want when everything kind of plays out. Are you okay with a very light simulation that produces kind of a cartoon image of what would happen in the real world? Or do you want something that gets as close to reality as you possibly can? Or do you want something in between?
Mm-hmm.
The crunch of your rules, the amount of rules that you have, is what's going to place you on that spectrum. So if you want to really closely simulate reality, you have to make peace with the fact that you're going to have a complex game. And if you are okay with sacrificing some of that, you can scale back in complexity and not worry so much about it. What you can't do, though, is take something like Morkborg, where the rules fit on like 2 pages, and expect the result all the way out here. Honestly, like, you can't take Morkborg and expect a competent game in front of you. But
opinion detected, shots fired.
You have to have a mechanically complete game, and Morkborg is not. As evidenced by when you talk to people who play it, they're like, "Oh, well, I use this system for this or this system for this," and you're like, "Is that in the book?" No, that's from this game or this game. Oh, so you're not actually playing Morkborg. If you tried to just play Morkborg, you wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, and I'm a big fan of Calarath, and that is similar but opposite. It's extremely light and rules light, but it has self-contained all the systems that you need for a fulfilling game experience.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting comparison to make.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually the author Castlegrief, who wrote Calarath, said that Morkborg was one of his inspirations for getting back into gaming in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting that is. But I've heard similar things. I've noticed over Morkborg around the time I arrived on the scene a couple years ago was all the rage. People were talking about, everybody loved Morkborg. There was all this Borgy stuff being released, third-party stuff and everything like that. And but in all that time, I've never heard anybody talk about what a great system it is. They just talk about how like metal the aesthetic is and whatever.
It's vibes-based gaming. And that's a Patty's Parlor original that I stole.
Pattyism.
Yep. But that's what it comes down to. And that's now, Shadow Dark is not like this at all. Shadow Dark is a complete game. Yeah. True Mad Tinkerer. Yeah, exactly. But so many of these like rules light games, that's what they are. They're vibes-based gaming because
they're truly incomplete. I get that. I would not be happy with a game that is lacking clear and obvious parts to it.
Right.
Giant Lands is one I bought that one. It's a beautifully made game, but the system is so flawed that Jim Ward is turning over in his grave to have his name put on that thing.
Yeah.
But in any case, we are over time. we just blew right on past that. All right. For the people who just loved hearing you talk, both of them, where can they find you? Where can we learn more?
Yep. So you guys can find me. I try to post every week on Substack, and that is RGH Press is my Substack. Right now I'm going through a series called The GM's Dagger, which once it's completed, I'll compile into a small booklet. Basically, it's, these are ideas that you keep as your sidearm as a GM. When you're in doubt, you come back to these core philosophies, and they'll help get you through it. And so that's what we're doing right now. I have an article on the idea of high and low time preference coming out later this week. You can also find me on YouTube. I'm also RGH Press on YouTube now. Mm-hmm. And then on X, I am at Howard_Ryan Gregg. I do a lot of cooking and baking. So on X, I've been posting a lot of pictures of stuff that I've been baking. So you can see that too. It's not just game takes. It's also delicious food and pop culture opinions.
I am a big fan of food.
Oh yeah.
Food. A big fan of food. So
Food's
when we get, I expect to be impressed when we meet in person.
Absolutely. And then the last thing to mention is, of course, the Rakes Codex of Nighthaven. It's on Drive-Thru RPG. It's on Lulu. You can get print on demand on either place. The Lulu version is better quality, but you can bundle the print on demand with the PDF on drive-through. So
okay, that's good to know. Check that out. I have the PDF myself, and I do enjoy it. It is a fun and thought-provoking read because of the kind of ideas that you bring to the table. It's not your standard dungeon crawl or even just a simple it's a gang of thieves or a heist. It's a very in-depth place to explore with a set of characters that's not just a boring this is the time we fast forward through. The city can be interesting, and that's the real point you prove with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been John with Jack. Thank you for tagging along with us, and join us next week. This time zone time slot worked out so well, I might switch back to this normally. I might make this the normal time slot. It's worked out pretty well.
Awesome.
Ryan, thank you very much, sir.